The Christmas tree shimmered in the corner, its lights twinkling against the ornaments that had adorned it for years. The fireplace crackled, filling the room with warmth, and the scent of cinnamon rolls drifted in from the kitchen. By all appearances, it was a perfect holiday morning, the kind captured in greeting cards and Hallmark movies. But beneath the festive glow, a coldness lingered, a weight pressing against my chest, heavy and unspoken. My mother, draped in her red velvet robe, stood in the center of the room with a triumphant grin. She clutched a small, elegant box wrapped in gold foil, tied with a delicate satin ribbon. Her eyes gleamed as she turned to my sister, Sabrina, handing it over with the kind of reverence reserved for life-changing moments. Sabrina gasped before she had even unwrapped the gift, her manicured fingers delicately peeling away the paper, her lips already forming an exaggerated, "Oh my God." She was always like this, a performer by nature, ensuring every reaction was camera-worthy. And then she saw it. A key. A single silver key nestled inside a velvet-lined box. My stomach twisted. "We bought her a house," my mother exclaimed, her voice trembling with excitement, as if Sabrina had just cured a rare disease or achieved something extraordinary. A house. I blinked, my gaze shifting between my mother and father, who nodded solemnly in agreement, as if this were some sacred family rite of passage. Sabrina shrieked in delight, throwing her arms around them, murmuring endless thank yous like a wind-up toy. I sat motionless, my fingers tightening around the thin envelope that had been placed on my lap minutes earlier. An afterthought, a consolation prize. No applause, no grand announcement, just a quiet, almost dismissive, "Here," from my father. Mom turned to me then, her expression softening into something patronizing. "You'll understand someday," she said, a condescending smile curling at the edges of her lips. My fingers trembled as I slid them under the flap of the envelope, carefully pulling out a single sheet of paper. My heart pounded as I hesitated, already knowing, already feeling, the sting of what was inside. Before I even read the words, my mind drifted back to all the moments like this, all the ways they had shown me, time and time again, where I stood in this family. Birthdays where Sabrina received designer handbags while I got practical items from clearance racks. Dinners where my voice was a whisper drowned out by my sister's endless monologues. The night I won a full scholarship, and no one showed up to the awards ceremony because Sabrina had a dance recital the same evening. For years, I convinced myself I was being dramatic, that I was imagining it. But there was no mistaking the truth now. A house for Sabrina, an envelope for me. I took a deep breath and unfolded the paper, my eyes scanning the words. A polite, cold statement. The family trust had made other financial considerations for me. My parents had taken out loans in my name. They had signed papers, without my consent, using my credit. My finances had been tied up in ways I never agreed to, and yet, here I was, expected to accept it with a smile and gratitude. My father glanced over at me then, oblivious, or perhaps indifferent, to the storm brewing inside me. "Aren't you going to open it?" he asked casually, sipping his coffee. I looked at him, my smile barely holding, my hands gripping the paper tightly enough to crinkle the edges. My silence stretched longer than it should have, long enough for him to notice the flicker of something different in my expression. Confusion passed over his face, followed by something else. Something tighter, more uncertain. Good. I forced my lips into a small smile, folding the paper neatly and placing it back in the envelope. I kept my voice light, controlled. I already did. For the first time that morning, an eerie silence settled over the room. "You'll understand someday," my mother had said. But I already did, just not in the way she thought. The weight of my family's indifference had settled into my bones long before I ever found the documents that changed everything. It wasn't one moment that did it. It was years of accumulated slights, small wounds that festered over time until they turned into something far worse than pain. They became clarity. I had spent my entire life living in the shadows of my sister Sabrina's successes, real or exaggerated, while my own achievements were treated like afterthoughts. It wasn't enough that I worked twice as hard. I was expected to do so silently, without the expectation of praise or even basic acknowledgement. And yet, when my parents handed her a house while giving me nothing but a legal document buried in an envelope, I realized something profound. I was never meant to be part of their future. I was merely a stepping stone, a dependable tool they could rely on to support the family while Sabrina shined in the spotlight. That realization should have devastated me. Instead, it ignited something deeper, something that had been smoldering inside me for years, waiting for the right moment to erupt. And that moment arrived the weekend I visited my parents' house. I hadn't been home in over a year, avoiding the suffocating presence of my family except for obligatory phone calls and the occasional holiday dinner that left me hollow. The only reason I had agreed to visit this time was because my mother had called me twice in the same week, her voice tinged with carefully placed guilt. My father had hurt his back doing yard work, she said. He needed help moving some things. It was a simple request, one that any dutiful daughter would fulfill. And so, like a fool, I went. The house was just as I remembered it, cold, pristine, and filled with framed photographs of Sabrina at every stage of her life. Graduation pictures, beauty pageant trophies, even her first modeling gig for a local boutique. My presence in the house was almost an afterthought, a ghost in the periphery of their memories. Sabrina wasn't there, of course. She had work commitments, which likely meant a last-minute trip with her boyfriend or some social event too important to skip. That was fine by me. I preferred dealing with my parents without her manufactured charm sucking all the oxygen out of the room. That night, after enduring an excruciatingly dull dinner, filled with talk of home renovations and Sabrina's latest big break, I found myself wandering the halls of my childhood home. I told myself I was just stretching my legs, escaping the forced conversation. But something led me toward my father's office, a room I had rarely entered, mostly because I was never invited. The door was slightly ajar, and the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminated the room. At first, I thought nothing of it. But then I saw it, the safe, the one my father always treated like some sacred relic. It was slightly open, just enough for the handle to hang loose, as if he had been in a hurry and forgotten to secure it properly. I should have walked away. I should have ignored it, gone back upstairs and pretended I didn't see anything. But I didn't. Something compelled me to step inside, my heartbeat drumming in my ears. My hands felt steady as I pulled the safe open fully, revealing stacks of neatly organized folders. At first, the contents looked normal. Tax returns, property deeds, financial statements. But then, buried beneath the expected paperwork, I found an envelope with my name on it. It wasn't fancy, not even sealed. But when I pulled out the document inside and saw what it was, my breath caught in my throat. It was a property deed, a house purchased years ago. And the owner listed? Me. I sat down heavily in my father's desk chair, scanning the details again and again, my mind scrambling for answers. Why had my father bought property under my name without telling me? Why had they never mentioned it, never so much as hinted at its existence? Then I found something even worse, a financial authorization form with my signature on it, except it wasn't mine. Someone had forged my name. Someone had used my identity to move money. And suddenly, It all made sense. The scholarships, the extra jobs I had taken, the financial independence I had clawed my way toward. None of it had been enough for them. They had been using me in ways I hadn't even realized. For the first time in my life, I had power, real power, and for the first time in my life I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. I didn't say anything the next morning. I sat through breakfast, made polite conversation, even smiled when my mother asked if I had finally met a nice boy. Then I packed my bags, said my goodbyes, and left. And the moment I got back to my apartment, I began to plan my revenge. As I left my parents' house that weekend, I carried more than just my overnight bag. I carried the weight of a discovery that would alter everything I thought I knew about my family's financial affairs. The will, the property in my name, the forged documents. They were all pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was assembling. I spent the next few weeks in a state of quiet turmoil. At work, I remained composed, efficient, the professional they expected me to be. But outside of office hours, I was relentless in my research. I met with my lawyer friend again, this time armed with copies of the documents I'd found. "This is serious," she said, flipping through the pages. "If these signatures are forged, that's fraud. And if these properties and bank accounts were registered under your name without your knowledge, it means someone has been using your identity for financial gain." My stomach twisted. I had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made it all the more real. "What are my options?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the rage simmering beneath my skin. She leaned back in her chair, thoughtful. "Legally, you have several paths. You could report this to the authorities, press charges for fraud, and demand an audit of all accounts under your name. Or you could take a more strategic approach." "Strategic?" I raised an eyebrow. She nodded. "If you go in guns blazing, your parents might get spooked, try to move assets around, cover their tracks. But if you gather more information, build a stronger case, you could hit them where it hurts most and ensure they can't weasel out of it." I exhaled slowly. As much as I wanted immediate justice, I knew she was right. A well-planned move would be far more effective than an impulsive confrontation. Over the next few months, I dug deeper. I requested official records, traced bank transactions, and found discrepancies that couldn't be ignored. The lake house, the one my parents bragged about so often, had been leveraged multiple times over the years to fund Sabrina's ventures. My father had taken out loans under my name, assuming I'd never find out. And my mother? She had known about it all along. The realization hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the betrayal, the blatant disregard for me as an individual. To them, I had never been more than a resource, a safety net for when their golden child failed. But they had underestimated me. With every piece of evidence I collected, my plan took shape. I wasn't just going to reclaim what was mine. I was going to make them feel the weight of every decision they had made. By the time December arrived, I had everything in place. The lake house was about to go up for auction due to unpaid debts, and thanks to my careful maneuvering, I had arranged to buy it out from under them. They had no idea that their most prized possession was about to slip through their fingers. And when Christmas morning came, I was ready. I had rehearsed every possible reaction in my mind, every excuse they might throw at me, every plea they might attempt. But nothing could prepare me for the moment I placed that small, unassuming envelope in my father's hands. As he read the contents, his expression morphed from confusion to horror. My mother gasped, reaching for the papers as if touching them would change the words written there. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I met her gaze, my own voice steady and unwavering. It's exactly what it looks like. I own the lake house now, and I'm not sharing it." The silence that followed was deafening, and in that moment I knew this was just the beginning of their reckoning. The silence stretched on, thick and oppressive, the weight of unspoken words pressing against my chest. My father sat hunched over, his hands gripping the documents I had given him, his knuckles turning white. My mother, usually so poised, looked as if someone had knocked the air out of her. And Sabrina, she simply stared, her fingers still clutching the designer purse she had been so excited about just moments ago. The house, once filled with false cheer, now felt like a vacuum, pulling the warmth from the room. I let the moment linger, allowing them to process the full extent of what had just happened. My father had been exposed, his financial missteps laid bare. My mother, complicit in the decades of favoritism, now faced the reality that their golden child was not the one holding all the cards. And Sabrina, oh dear Sabrina, she was realizing for the first time that she wasn't untouchable, that the world wouldn't always bend to her whims. This has to be a mistake," my mother finally sputtered, reaching for the papers as if she could physically erase the words on the page. "You can't own the lake house. It's our family's legacy." "Correction," I said, my voice smooth and even. "It was your legacy. You lost that the moment you decided to mortgage it behind everyone's back, and I made sure it didn't end up in the hands of strangers. You should be thanking me." My father finally looked up, his jaw tight. "How did you even do this?" he asked, his voice a forced calm. "You don't have that kind of money." A slow smile spread across my face. "It's amazing what happens when you plan ahead, Dad. You see, while you were busy funneling money into Sabrina's failed ventures, I was building something for myself. I was watching, waiting, and when the opportunity came, I took it." Sabrina scoffed, the first sign of life in her stunned expression. "This is insane. You went behind our backs and stole our house?" I turned to her, amused by her outrage. "Stole?" "No, Sabrina. You see, I bought it legally, with my own money. The same way you got your house. Except I didn't need Mommy and Daddy to hand it to me on a silver platter." Her face twisted in anger. "You're just bitter. You've always been jealous of me." I laughed then, the sound sharp and cutting. "Jealous? No, Sabrina. I stopped wanting what you had a long time ago. What I wanted was respect. And now I have something even better. Control." My mother shook her head, still in disbelief. "You went through all this just to punish us?" I set my coffee cup down with deliberate care. "No, Mother. I did this because I was tired of being used, tired of being the afterthought, the one who was always expected to give without ever receiving. You built this house of cards, and now you're watching it collapse. That's not my fault. It's yours." Sabrina's voice cracked with frustration. "You're really going to keep the house from us?" "Oh, I'm not keeping it from you," I said, standing up and smoothing the hem of my sweater. "I'm just finally taking what was mine all along. And the best part? There's nothing you can do about it." The finality of my words settled over them like a funeral shroud. My father's hands trembled, my mother's eyes welled with unshed tears, and Sabrina clenched her fists as if that alone could reverse what had been done. I turned toward the door, the weight that had burdened me for years finally lifting from my shoulders. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their love, not if it came at the cost of my dignity. As I reached for the doorknob, I glanced back one last time. "Enjoy your Christmas," I said, my voice light, almost cheerful. "I know I will." And with that, I walked out, leaving them to sit in the ruins of their own making. The silence that followed my father's realization was the most deafening sound I had ever heard. The weight of what he held in his hands, the transfer papers, the legal notice, the undeniable proof, seemed to crush the very air in the room. My mother's mouth parted as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out. Sabrina clutched her designer purse as if it might shield her from the unraveling of our family's perfectly curated illusion. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the moments stretch out, letting them sit in the reality of what I had done. No outbursts, no dramatic monologues, just the truth, sitting there on the dining table like an unexploded bomb. Finally, my father exhaled sharply, gripping the papers so tightly his knuckles turned white. "This is a joke," he muttered, shaking his head. "There's no way." "It's legal," I interrupted, my voice steady, cold, and binding. "The lake house belongs to me now. It was put up for auction months ago and I bought it. Quietly, legally. Just as you did when you forged my name on those documents." My mother turned to him, her face contorted with confusion and betrayal. "Forged?" she whispered. "What is she talking about?" I leaned back in my chair, watching as realization dawned on her. "Oh, he didn't tell you," I said with a small, knowing smile. "He used my name, my identity, to move money, to cover debts, to mortgage the house in secret. I found the documents in your safe." My father's eyes darted toward my mother, and for the first time in my life, I saw true fear in his expression. Not fear of me, but fear of what she might do now that she knew. "You used her name?" My mother's voice was sharp, incredulous. "Without telling her?" "She wasn't supposed to find out," my father admitted through gritted teeth. "I was going to fix everything." "Fix everything," I repeated, shaking my head. "You mean, you were going to keep pretending, keep using me, until you could shift the blame onto someone else. You never intended to fix anything." Sabrina, still clutching her purse, finally found her voice. "But what about us?" she blurted. "What happens to the lake house now? We were supposed to spend our summers there. Mom and Dad were going to retire there." I tilted my head, feigning consideration. "That sounds like a personal problem." Her face flushed. "You can't do this. We're family." "Family," I echoed, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "Is that what you call it? I was nothing but an afterthought to you. The backup daughter, the convenient resource when you needed something." I let my gaze settle on each of them in turn. But not anymore. My mother turned back to me, her voice softer now, laced with desperation. "We can fix this, sweetheart. We'll figure something out." I stood, smoothing down my sweater, the calm in my demeanor only making their panic more palpable. "There's nothing to fix," I said simply. "I've already taken care of it." My father's hand curled into a fist. "You think this makes you better than us?" He spat. I met his gaze, unflinching. "No," I said. "It just makes me free." I turned toward the door, feeling their stunned silence trail behind me like an old shadow. And for the first time in my life, I walked away from them without looking back. Christmas morning had always followed the same tired script in our house. A perfectly staged performance where every smile was rehearsed, every gesture deliberate, and every damn emotion filtered through layers of passive-aggressive tradition and overly sweet coffee. The tree stood in the same corner it always had, strung with gold lights and ornaments my mother insisted on keeping, despite the fact that half of them were chipped or cracked. The fire crackled, the cinnamon rolls burned slightly around the edges, and the scent of fake cheer filled the room like an invisible fog no one dared comment on. It was the kind of holiday morning that looked perfect from the outside, like a snow globe you'd proudly display on a shelf. But inside the glass, the air was stiff and bitter, and every word was one breath away from breaking into something sharp, I sat on the same worn armchair I'd occupied every year since I was 16, the only difference now being the quiet rage that hummed beneath my skin like an old wound that never quite healed. My carefully wrapped gift sat on my lap, a plain white box, clean corners, no bow, no frills, just a box, waiting patiently while Sabrina shrieked with excitement over her new designer purse, gushing over how it matched the shoes she had just unwrapped 15 minutes earlier. My parents looked at her with that familiar look of pride and indulgence, the same one I used to chase until I realized they'd never aim it in my direction, no matter what I did. And then came the moment, the one I'd been waiting for with a patience I didn't know I had. I handed the box to my father, keeping my face blank, my smile pleasant but distant, the way someone smiles at a stranger on a train. He took it without hesitation, cracking a quick joke about how light it felt, glancing over at Sabrina with a smug grin as if to say, "She probably got me socks again." But his expression shifted the second he lifted the lid and pulled out the envelope. There was no card, no novelty tie, no quirky little gadget, just an envelope sealed in wax, sitting in the center of the box like a perfectly laid trap. He opened it slowly, still trying to play it cool, still underestimating me the way he always had. He unfolded the papers with one hand while sipping coffee with the other, his mouth already forming some sarcastic comment that never made it past his lips. Because by the time he read the first sentence, the color had drained from his face so fast I thought he might actually pass out. His eyes darted across the page like he was hoping he'd misunderstood, like the words might rearrange themselves into something less threatening if he just read them fast enough. But there was no misunderstanding. In his hands were two documents. One, a notarized letter declaring me the sole legal owner of the family lake house, and two, the official court documentation confirming the successful transfer of property ownership through a silent auction that had taken place 2 months earlier. I didn't say a word as he read it again, slower this time, his face tightening with each line, the coffee cup in his hand trembling just slightly as the weight of it all sank in. My mother leaned over his shoulder, curious now, her face still glowing with post-gift giddiness, until her eyes caught the bold header of the court paperwork. Her lips parted slightly, confusion blooming into panic, and then, just like that, she turned to me with a voice that trembled at the edge of disbelief and whispered, "What is this?" I met her gaze without blinking. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, my voice even, almost gentle, like I was telling her the weather forecast instead of dropping a bomb in the middle of her curated holiday fantasy. She turned to my father, asking something in a low, urgent tone that I couldn't quite hear, but I didn't need to, because whatever she said made his face crumple in a way I'd never seen before. Not rage, not confusion, just quiet, creeping devastation. That's when the final piece clicked into place, when Mom finally realized something had been happening behind her back all along. Because it wasn't just the fact that I now own their precious retirement home. It was the fact that Dad had kept a secret from her, a secret that started years ago when he mortgaged the lake house without telling anyone, probably thinking he could clean up the mess before it ever reached the surface. But he hadn't. The bank had moved faster than he expected. The property went into quiet auction, and by the time anyone noticed, it was too late. And I had been waiting, watching, ready. Sabrina, bless her clueless little heart, looked around the room like someone had just started speaking in a foreign language. She held her new purse close to her chest and blinked rapidly, unsure whether she should say something or just stay quiet. For once in her life, she chose the latter. My father still hadn't spoken. He just sat there holding the documents, his hands no longer trembling but completely still now, like the gravity of what had happened had finally settled into his bones. My mother stood up abruptly and took a step away from him, her eyes wide with realization, her breath hitching in her throat like a woman who'd just been slapped by a truth too heavy to bear. And then she broke. Just like that. Her shoulders collapsed inward, her voice cracked in a half-whispered question I couldn't make out, and for the first time in my life, I saw her as something other than untouchable, fragile, confused, betrayed by the man she thought she understood. I didn't move. I didn't offer comfort or explanation. I just sat there in silence, letting the weight of my revenge settle into the room like a storm cloud finally ready to rain. Because this wasn't just about property. It was about power, and for the first time ever, it belonged to me. The weight of the revelation settled heavily in the room. My father sat motionless, gripping the legal papers like they were his lifeline, his face ashen. My mother clutched at the fabric of her dress, her knuckles white, eyes darting between me and the documents as if looking for a loophole, a way out of the nightmare she suddenly found herself in. Sabrina, for once in her life, was speechless, her lips parted as though she wanted to argue, to plead, but no words came. I let the silence stretch. I wanted them to feel it, the same suffocating, soul-crushing silence I had endured for years while they overlooked me, belittled me, and stole from me. But now, for the first time, I was the one controlling the silence, and it felt intoxicating. My mother finally found her voice, brittle and uncertain. This has to be a mistake. I tilted my head, watching her unravel. No mistake, I said calmly. Just facts. Facts you never thought I'd discover. She turned to my father, eyes wide with desperation. Tell her it's a misunderstanding, that we would never... But my father wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the document in his hands, jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might break his teeth. I folded my arms, my voice carrying a new strength, a confidence I had never been allowed to display in this house before. You funneled money using my name. You put properties under my identity without my consent. You forged my signature. And you never once planned to tell me. You thought I would never find out, or if I did, I would be too naive, too loyal to do anything about it. But you underestimated me. Again. Sabrina shot forward, slamming a manicured hand on the table. You have no right to that house, she spat. That's our family's property. You can't just take it. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Can't I? I pulled out the second document from the envelope and slid it across the table towards her. Go ahead. Read it. Maybe then you'll understand. She snatched up the paper, scanning it quickly, and her face crumbled. My lawyer had been thorough. The document outlined every fraudulent transaction linked to my name, every asset my parents had hidden from me, and the final paragraph made it clear. I had the legal right to press charges for identity theft, fraud, and financial abuse. The consequences would be severe. My mother turned back to me, eyes glistening with tears. You wouldn't... I leaned in, leveling my gaze with hers. I would. She flinched, recoiling as if I had physically struck her. Sabrina shook her head in disbelief. You're punishing us, your own family, over some stupid house? I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. It's never been about the house, Sabrina. It's about everything. Every slight. Every stolen opportunity. Every time you got handed everything on a silver platter while I was left to fend for myself. This isn't punishment. This is justice. My father finally looked up, his voice hoarse. And what do you want? I tapped the documents. You will sign over any remaining assets tied to my name. If you try to fight it, I will take you to court, and the scandal will destroy what's left of your reputation. I paused, letting my words sink in. And from this moment forward, I am no longer your convenient afterthought. If you ever try to manipulate me again, I won't just take a house. I will take everything." A strangled sound escaped my mother's throat, half a sob, half a gasp. My father slumped further in his seat, defeated. I straightened, smoothing down my coat. "I have spent my entire life doing everything for this family, sacrificing my own happiness for your benefit. No more." I turned towards the door, my heart pounding with adrenaline and something else. Something lighter. Freedom. "Merry Christmas," I murmured over my shoulder as I walked away. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. The silence in the room was suffocating. My father sat frozen, gripping the papers as if he could will them to change. My mother's face twisted into something between shock and betrayal. And Sabrina, poor, clueless Sabrina, just blinked at me, mouth slightly open, clutching her designer purse like it could somehow shield her from the destruction unfolding before her eyes. I let the silence stretch, savoring the weight of it. The years of being dismissed, the endless sacrifices, the constant overshadowing. This moment was my retribution. I had been invisible for too long. Today, they saw me. "What? What is this?" my mother finally croaked out, her voice barely above a whisper. I tilted my head slightly, feigning confusion. "It's exactly what it looks like." Her lips trembled as she turned to my father, her expression desperate, pleading for some sort of explanation. But he had none. His hands trembled as he read the documents again, the reality sinking in. The lake house, their beloved retreat, their symbol of wealth and legacy, was no longer theirs. It was mine. "You," my father finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "You bought it?" "Yes," I said simply, my tone calm, unwavering. "I bought it." But how? Why?" My mother's voice was rising now, laced with desperation. "We're family, for God's sake." I let out a quiet chuckle, shaking my head. "Family? Is that what we are?" Because it never felt like that to me. I took a step forward, my heels clicking against the polished wood floor. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? That I wouldn't notice when my own identity was being used to cover your financial mess?" My father's face drained of all color. "We didn't—" "Don't lie to me," I cut him off sharply. "Not now." I turned to Sabrina, whose lower lip was trembling. "And you," I said, my voice softer but still cutting. "You got everything handed to you your entire life. Every opportunity, every ounce of love and pride. And I let it happen. I let all of you walk over me because I thought maybe, just maybe, one day you'd see me. But you never did." Sabrina swallowed hard. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't." I sighed, shaking my head. "Because you never had to. Everything was given to you, wrapped in a golden bow, while I had to claw my way through life just to be noticed." My mother was crying now, her hands gripping the sides of her chair. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. We thought you were strong. We thought you didn't need us the way Sabrina did." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "That's the thing about strength, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "Just because someone carries the weight of the world on their shoulders doesn't mean they should have to." Silence fell over the room once more. My father slumped in his chair, defeated. My mother covered her face with shaking hands. Sabrina just sat there, shell-shocked. And I felt lighter than I had in years. I reached for my coat, slipping it on with slow, deliberate movements. Then, just as I reached the door, I turned back one last time. "Oh," I said, my voice casual, almost amused. "And just so we're clear, you're not welcome at the lake house. Not now. Not ever. My mother let out a soft sob, and my father let his head drop into his hands. I turned the doorknob and stepped outside, the cold air hitting my face like a fresh start. For years I had been the forgotten daughter, the one left behind, the one expected to sacrifice and endure in silence. But not anymore. Now, I had taken back what was rightfully mine, and for the first time in my life, I was truly free.